Alright, so I'm filming this after I've completed. I figured I would make a short video about explaining what exactly the issue that I was having was with this e-brake scenario. So effectively what was happening was I would adjust the e-brake following all the standard procedures, where I would take that 14mm bolt out with the e-brake handle down all the way. I would adjust the hex nut so the wheel wouldn't move, and then I would back the hex nut off a little bit. Operations of that. But what was happening was the caliper itself was binding. So when I would pull the e-brake handle up, when I would return the handle back down, the wheels would still be locked, and I would get under the car and I would see that the cable had returned because it wasn't tight up against that bracket on the brake caliper. I was considering that both of the remanufactured units that I have in the back were just had failed, but it was strange that both of them were doing it same way at the same time. I spoke with a couple people, and apparently if that occurs, oftentimes what that means is that the caliper itself has traveled too far. Like the internal mechanisms have traveled too far in their bore. I even took some video that I'll link in the description of all of the cabling mechanism moving. Everything seemed fine, and effectively someone that I spoke with convinced me that the cabling was probably stretching very slightly, and that was giving me the issue that I was having. As you'll see in the video that I'll link, the cable in the car right up at the handbrake had come unwound slightly. So when I was adjusting that long nut, it actually was not really doing very much adjustment. I was mostly just like winding and unwinding the cabling that was in there. So yeah, the whole thing was, that was almost certainly the problem. I decided to get new cables the whole length because I didn't want to have to try and like test and verify whether or not there was any stretch in the cabling. So I figured it's worth it to me to get the three sections, both the cable from the handbrake to the equalizer, and then each backside, because in total it was like, I don't know, like $70 from Rock Auto, and that's about the cost of another remanufactured brake caliper, just one side. So I figured it's worth it to me to try and replace all those and take that whole thing out of the equation. So if I got the caliper to not bind, if I sort of had adjusted it in just a way that was like right on that boundary of binding or not binding, what I found was if I got the e-brake to work at all, then it would really only hold for a couple of days or a week, and even then it was like not great. So it was super variable, which was also very strange. It wasn't just consistently doing one mode of failure or another. Like sometimes I would get it to work and it would seem like it would work fine, but then a week and a half later it would totally let itself go. And over the last a couple of weeks specifically, over the last year this has been going on, but over the last couple of weeks specifically, it's just gotten worse and worse, like very rapidly. So it was to the point where no matter what I did, how I adjusted it, with the handbrake all the way up, I could just push the car with one hand. So I knew that there was obviously something going on. So the whole point of this video was to diagnose the inoperative e-brake as well as a sporadically engaging e-brake, which I thought was calipers, but it ends up being cables, even though I had convinced myself that it wasn't cabling because I had seen the video myself of all of the travel, and it seemed okay, but clearly it wasn't.
Hello. So today you join me from under the car. I am going to be replacing my e-brake cables, and first step, so I had to take off this cover here that covers the fuel filter area and also where the bracket before the right side cable goes. Now for this bolt here, and same deal on the other side. So I've already sprayed it down a little bit. The next step is to take this clip and this clip off, and then everything should just kind of slide out, which is nice. These spin out of the holder, the distributor here. And I guess I have to take this return spring off as well. We'll see how that goes. That should be quite interesting. But next up is taking these off. Hopefully that goes fairly smooth. I've read that taking the drive shaft off is like super critical and important and awesome, but at the same time, I don't really want to take off anything that I don't have to. So we're gonna see how much more difficult it makes my life if I don't do that. I'll report back afterwards. Alright, I thought this might be a good time to show you the progress. So I got the first one out, the top one here. So by taking one of my hooked picks and I looped it through this piece here, and I effectively pulled down on it, and in the process pulled out that clip. That was actually pretty straightforward. This one is kind of in a weird spot, but I found that if I use this tiny little screwdriver and let's see, focus, and I'm basically just prying this way back and forth, and it just made a huge jump downwards. So I think we're nearly out at this point. Just a matter of wiggling it. There's not a whole lot of room on top of that PPF there, and I understand why people say that removing your drive shaft and exhaust is, quote, necessary, but I don't know. That bolt does not look like a thing that I want to play with, so I figured I would at least give it a try. I'd rather spend an extra hour finagling with this than many hours and much more money repairing any sort of potential catastrophe that would occur from taking off the drive shaft or exhaust. Primarily the exhaust. I think the drive shaft wouldn't be so much of an issue, but exhaust stuff, it never really goes back on together well. So that's that. More updates soon. Alright, so I have just come back from lunch. Everything came out just as planned. Prying up with the screwdriver worked exactly as intended. That was super easy, and truthfully, I would recommend that a lot of people try that first before they go ahead and just start removing exhaust, drive shaft, whatever, PPF. I'd rather, like I said earlier, I'd rather spend an hour, even 2 hours, trying to finagle in that small space than have to deal with the potentially breaking bolts along the way otherwise. So I got them out. Your results may vary. Luckily mine aren't super rusted, so I kind of lucked out in that regard. I'm going to put a ton of anti-seize on these, but so far so good. So I have everything in place. Everything's just sort of finger tight for now, and I will kind of go through and show you the arrangement of everything now, and then I'm going to start the adjustment procedure for the e-brake. I do have the long nut that's inside the cabin that is at the handbrake lever itself. I have that just tight, just like so that there's no slack in the line up there, so that I have sort of pretty much full range of adjustment if I need to. Alright, so I'm going to start up as it comes out from where the handbrake is. There's that this mounting bracket right here, if it will focus, right here. This was to a heat shield that is no more. Here's the equalizer, and if you don't have these equal lengths, then as you pull the e-brake, you'll have an uneven tension on these lines. So if it's torqued this way, this is already going to have some preload. So as you go to pull the e-brake, this, and they switch. Where am I? So they switch. They actually cross. So on the driver's side, and it goes to the passenger side e-brake. It goes down, up on top of the gas tanks, and then it comes out here, goes over to the wheel on the passenger side. Same thing here. We have the passenger side of the car. Cable comes down, passes out here to the mounting bracket, and down to the wheel. And again, I have these. This is just sort of finger tight here, but they are actually adjusted all the way back. What's going on? This back nut is all the way against the sheathing here. That way I have full extension on the e-brake mechanisms here. So I'm just gonna go ahead, before I start the adjustment process, I'm gonna push these out just to make sure they're all the way. I'm gonna come in here, get my 4mm hex, do a regular e-brake adjustment, and hopefully it should be good to go. And then once I get this correct in the back, I'll go up into the cabin and adjust at the handle, that long nut, to make sure I have the correct amount of clicks for the travel, and then hopefully it'll just work. So stay tuned. Everything seems to be working really well. The e-brake is super tight. It actually significantly slows me down if I'm driving and I pull it up. Button in, obviously, but oh, you may have noticed that I didn't put the return spring on to the equalizer mechanism. There's a return spring that makes sure that pulls it back into place when you put the e-brake handle down. I've since installed that before I went on the drive, but I didn't feel it necessary to videotape it. Anyways, it took me about I don't know, 4.5, 5 hours, including lunch and test drive. Yeah, I can't really give you a whole lot more advice. I didn't film any of the e-brake adjustment because there are already so many videos out there and forum posts about how to adjust the e-brake. Just follow that procedure. Yeah, well, till the next time.